Hello, entrepreneurs and spouses. My name is Kelly Clements, and I am a coach for entrepreneurs and their spouses, helping couples to integrate the intersection of marriage and business. And one of the most common topics that get brought up is either a challenge or an opportunity with entrepreneurial couples is finance. So I have invited Pam Prior to be on this call with me. She is a CFO-For-Hire. She works with many successful entrepreneurs, and she is such an expert in the financial territory. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Pam, to the call. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. I'm really, really glad to be here. I think this is a great topic and an incredible intersection to talk about because so many entrepreneurs out there are part of some sort of family dynamic.
Yep, absolutely. And big, huge thanks to Giovanni for connecting us. I found you through the Archangel Network. So thank you,
Gio.
So Pam, there's three big topics that I run into with money and entrepreneurs that I want to run by you. And just to give our viewers a chance to see what we're going to be covering today, the three biggest questions I get is one around financial disclosure. So maybe the entrepreneur is not sharing financial information with the spouse, either out of privacy or protection of the business, and maybe out of protecting the spouse where they don't want to get the spouse to get burdened with the roller coaster of the financial state of the business, which is common for most entrepreneurs. So the first thing I want to cover is financial disclosure. And then the other thing that seems to be a hot topic with entrepreneurs and spouses is how much gets reinvested back into the business. So maybe on paper, the business looks really, really healthy, but it's tied up and the cash isn't liquid. Or every time the business grows, the cash is going back into the business to fund that growth. And so is there a tipping point or a threshold where the family starts to get to enjoy some of that growth? And then the third and final and most important one is, how do you balance the financial disparity? So if one partner is working and the other isn't, can we put a value on the spouse at home? And how do we close that gap emotionally? I know you're not a psychologist, and nor am I. But from a financial perspective, I have my own perspective on that, but I'd love your intake from a financial perspective on how we bridge that gap. So awesome. We go ahead and start with the first one.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you want to lay it back out again just to make sure everybody remembers?
Yes. So the first one is financial disclosure, and how much financial disclosure is good to take place between an entrepreneur and their spouse as it relates to financial perspective.
Yeah. Can you see my board?
I can.
Okay, good. Because I'm going to kind of think out loud as I go. And as you were asking that question, I thought of four real areas financially to kind of think about in that conversation. The first is going to be around risk tolerance. A little discussion there. The second is around communication skills. The third is around advice and help, which I'll put in quotes. And the fourth is the how. Once you determine how much disclosure, how do I do this? So the first thing that's really important to know is that entrepreneurs, as a rule, have a very high risk tolerance. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurial spouses may or may not have that same risk tolerance. So you need to recognize going in, and I think everybody does, that when you're coming into this conversation, you're coming at it from two very, very different angles a lot of the time. And I find with a lot of my clients, it's the entrepreneur is the more risk tolerant, and the non-entrepreneur, or whether it's a stay-at-home partner or works in a regular business with a salary partner, they tend to have a much lower risk tolerance. So when, as the entrepreneur, we are very enthusiastic and very focused and willing to take the risks. When we're talking to somebody who has a whole different concept about money, you need to take it down a notch. Okay. So for example, when as an entrepreneur, we say, oh, I know I'm investing in the marketing for revenue that's going to come in 2 months. What a conservative spouse hears is, you're throwing money away with a 50-50 shot, you're going to get something back for it. Mm-hmm. So you need to have that in mind, that literally everything you say that's based in the entrepreneurial risk model, which, face it, we can't be entrepreneurs without taking risks, right? We have to believe that the time, whatever the asset is, be it time, energy, money that we're putting in today, is going to give us a big return tomorrow. That's part of our mindset. But if you're finding that you can't have the conversation, or you don't want to have the conversation with your spouse because of a reaction that you might get, be it emotional, passive, angry, whatever it might be, if you shift the context a little bit to just understand where they're coming from in their mindset, you can change the nature of that conversation a little bit. And you can say something like, for example, in this case, say I'm about to spend $30,000 on running a massively high scale event with video production, the whole shooting match, bringing in speakers, blah, blah, blah. And I haven't sold a ticket yet. I'm going to say, yep, I'm putting this money in. I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to think abundantly. I'm going to take the actions that I need to take to execute on my plan. And I know I'm going to make $60,000 and net out basically 100% return on that investment of money. And again, what your spouse is hearing is you're throwing away $30,000 on a pipe dream so that you can go stay in a fancy hotel for 3 days and have everybody look up at you and ooh and ah. That's what they're hearing.
Paid for yet? When is the house? Yep.
That's what they're hearing. So I would suggest changing the nature of that conversation to say something like, "Hey, wow, the entrepreneurial world's a little bit crazy. Part of what I have to do is invest a little money ahead of time to make a big outcome, and I'm thinking through the year about when and how much I want to put in and how I'm going to see the responsiveness or the success or failure of each of those things and adjust and pivot based on what I learn. And what this points back to is to have in place, and I'm a financial geek, so I'm going to land these on financial things, is a forecast. Because if you have a forecast in place, if you can look at the next 12 months out and say, oh, if I'm going to, yes, honey, this is the total spend I'm going to have in the business over these next 12 months. And here's the expected return in each of the months that you expect to see it. So here's what my bank balance is going to do. But I know it's going to do that, so I don't get upset about it. I have it written down. I expect it. And every 3 months or every month or however frequently you need to make them comfortable, let's go over it and see how we did on that first gamble. And if on the first gamble, you spent 30 and you got 60 back, all of a sudden you have an ally. Because one thing conservative people like is when money grows. They just need to know and understand that it can grow. So that's a big thing to remember when you're having the conversation. Set the context around the risk tolerance level of your spouse. So that to me tells you how much or how little to disclose. I think transparency is always best, because I will tell you that every entrepreneur I work with who is not transparent has this gray cloud hanging over their head. And that gray cloud takes it's any number of things that they seem to be dealing with. One is, oh my God, I've gotten us, if it's a bad situation, I've gotten us into this, I need to get us out of this. And all my wife or husband has been is wonderfully supportive. They don't deserve to have to see the effects of this. So we'll keep spending at the household level like we have been forever, so that they won't notice. And I'll just get more and more and more and more stressed about what I'm looking at, the emails I'm getting, the debt collectors who are calling, or whatever situation I've gotten myself into. Although it's a very fearful leap from looking at that and feeling like you have to solve it yourself to including your partner in the conversation, the relief that comes with including the partner in the conversation, I can see it in their faces. When they come back and say, you know what, I was scared to death going in. I had sweaty palms. I didn't know how to approach it, but we've talked about it and now I'm not alone.
Yes. And from a marriage perspective, what I see is like their intimacy, their connection, their closeness grows. It's like, it's that when you say there's a gray cloud over their heads, yes. And it becomes the thing in between them, that governs.
Nobody talks about, right? And believe me, your spouse knows. Your spouse knows what's going on. They're choosing to ignore it to make you feel better. They're trying to limit the amount of stress on you. So they're building up their own stress level, dealing with you building up your stress level and not telling them. And these two silos start to grow that often can't break the communication barrier. So that is a big one, risk tolerance. And communication, I think we're kind of dipping into now, is transparency. It's so important, but it's no different although it often is the thing that is more problematic than others, it's really no different than any other conversation in marriage. Whether you're negotiating chores, or you're negotiating who's going to pick the kids up and take them to the soccer game, whether you're negotiating how many times a week you're going to be intimate, or is there a date night, or whatever the thing is in a marriage that you're talking about or doing, this is no different. So you probably know pretty well in a marriage how to say things in a way that's going to trigger your partner, and how to say things in a way that's going to mitigate the issues and make it a more healthy conversation. And we all do this, right? When we're tense, when we're tired, and this goes to the transparency, we tend to go to the things that trigger, either to just push them off, make them mad and push them off, or because we're just closing more and more and more in on ourselves. So I don't think this question is as big of an issue for entrepreneurs where success is, where money's coming out the bottom of their funnel. I think the question, I'm guessing, is based more in when it's not going so well. And like any other thing in a marriage or your life, when it's not going well, it's the hardest thing to talk about, right? So what I would say about finances, and I say this often when I'm speaking, is if you're in a room of entrepreneurs, and I was recently in a room with a few hundred of them, and I said something to the effect of, look, there are kind of 4 things that keep us from dealing with the finances. 2 of them are mindset related, and one of those is fear or embarrassment. It's fear that people are going to see me and I'm going to be exposed and embarrassed in front of my peers. I said, in fact, right now, you're probably sitting there coming up with the thing about your finances that you're embarrassed about. And everybody kind of went like this. I said, now look to your left and look to your right and know that every single person in the room's got one of those. Mm-hmm. And I said, let's just put embarrassment on the shelf. There is nobody who's been an entrepreneur who hasn't done something that they consider embarrassing in their finances. Successful and 8 figures, or just starting out and so far in debt that you can't even see, your way out of the ground. So the one thing I would say is, as you consider talking about this to your spouse, don't make it any more of a mountain than any other difficult conversation with your spouse, because everybody's been here, and find a community that can help you understand that as well, so that you're really not alone in what you're feeling about it.
Totally.
So that's kind of thing number 2. Thing number 3 is actually interesting. And what I've found is that especially when things are not going well, if an entrepreneur communicates with their spouse will often want to help. And we all know, I think, as entrepreneurs, that actually hiring somebody to help or getting somebody to help in your business feels like a lot of different things. But most notably, it feels like there's no way I can explain this to you in a way you're going to understand it and be able to help me. I'll be spending more time to explain it to you than I will just doing it myself. And one of the things that actually stops entrepreneurs from really getting leverage at the point where they hit the higher 6 figures and $1 million is they believe this, mm-hmm. which I will go on to say they believe this crap about themselves. And you don't then take the steps that you need to take to effectively delegate the tasks that should be delegated in the organization, so that you are taking on a different role. And the fact of the matter is, if your business is going to grow successful as the owner and CEO, you're going to take on a different role as that business grows. But in the beginning, and when things are tough, it's very easy to say, and sometimes we can't afford to hire people, so you have to say it. I couldn't explain it to them anyway, and it'll take me twice as much time. Remember that your spouse is not an employee.
Yes.
Okay. That's my advice here. So a lot of times I think what we do is we take that same logic that we would apply to an assistant and say to our wife or our husband the same thing. And they're going, that's not what I'm here to talk about. How can I help you in any number of ways? Sure, administrative stuff, but can I give you a back rub at 5 o'clock when you're getting tense? Can I figure out a way to remove some other stressors in our life that could help a little bit? They generally, when they see you stressed, really mean they want to help, just like you do when you see your spouse stressed. So if your spouse said to you, no, you can't do this because I could never explain it to you in a way that would make you effective, they're going to be like, I'm your wife. You can have that conversation with me. So be careful of that term help. It doesn't necessarily mean can I be your admin assistant? So that's one thing. The second is a lot of time they'll offer advice. And when you're struggling, or if you're in trouble, or things aren't going really well, you're not necessarily going to want advice. You should have it. You should talk to as many people as you can, because the more opinions and the more input and different perspectives you get, the better your decision making can be. And people will have ideas and say something to some of my clients, and they'll go, "Oh my God, it changed my business in an instant." Mm-hmm. And Archangel's a great community for that. And if they, talk to another Archangel and somebody says, "Oh, I had that problem and I did ABC," they'll go, "I didn't even know that was an option." So talking to other entrepreneurs is a big deal, but also listening to your spouse is a big deal. They have a completely different perspective that you almost need to value more than you value somebody who knows and is down in the trenches in your business. This one tends to stay relevant as the business gets successful, because then the nature of the spouse's advice might change. You need to balance your work and life. You need to delegate more. You need to. So staying in sync with your partner, your spouse, in all the aspects of your life. I hate the term work-life balance. There's just so many things wrong with that concept, because so many people will tell you, I love my work. It's where I get my energy. So everybody's different there. So I don't mean work-life balance, but if that marriage is important to you and you've become successful in business, understand that marriage needs energy, and just be sure to provide it. And if you do that, what generally tends to happen is the advice stops. Because just like you're not going to advise your spouse on how they can best manage a meeting inside a, $50 billion organization, because you don't know all the details, they're not going to need to advise you. But if all of a sudden your spouse never comes home from work, you're going to start to offer advice on how they can fix that. So that's the kind of the help and the advice. They're not your employees. And sometimes that advice is really helpful. And remember to balance things so they don't feel they need to do it. But the biggest thing is how. Okay, I've decided to have the conversation. I've decided how to put it in context so that people don't get scared. How do I do this? And this is where I come back again to a forecast. And one of the things I think you're going to provide anybody who wants it is a link to what I have, a 13-week forecast. And I think there's also a PDF copy of my book in there that talks about this different kind of forecast here. I like to put a 12-month forecast together, and it doesn't have to be fancy. Okay. It's not like you got to go in and make sure your books are 100% in order and you've got an accountant and you've hired a CFO. Here's all you really need to think about. What in this context, hire a CFO, please. God, hire a CFO. That's what I do for a living. But you don't have to for this. All you really need to do is be able to say, hey, I know I'm going to invest this much money each month. And you put an amount in there, boom, 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 boom. That's what I'm going to spend. And I know that I'm expecting revenue to come of this much, boom, 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 boom. And I know that either leaves me with a negative or a positive or a negative balance here each month, and some cumulative balance, right? I'm going to be either making money or losing money. And most of us, when we do a forecast, we're going to show growth, unless we're already a really big organization and we know we're going to lose cash for a while because we're investing in future growth. But then you have something you can talk about with them, and they can see you doing this. Like you can say, I'm going to make 3 speeches here that are going to cost me money to travel to. And I expect for that to lead to 5 new clients here. And then you can say to your spouse at the end of the next month, hey, remember that speech I did last month? I thought I'd get 5 clients. I got 8. So I think I'm going to add another one of those here. It gives them something concrete to hang on to. So really with that same model that you're going to give a link to, just change it from 13 weeks to 12 months. And do the same sort of thought process. And that gives you, and plus having a piece of paper in front of you when you're discussing these kind of things with a less risk tolerant spouse makes all the difference in the world, because they know you're not just charging through headlong into the forest, throwing money like this in front of you, which is what they can think. Honestly, they don't really think that. But when you start to have the conversation after 3 or 4 months, they may go there just, to say, because they don't have any idea. They're blind to it.
Totally. And I've been going through the profit plan that I am going to share. I'll share this link with everybody watching.
Awesome.
It was the most powerful thing I've ever done, like line iteming everything. And I love the accountability when you talk about, hey, I'm going to spend $30,000 and this is what it's going to look like. It gives the spouse real time to see the numbers. Like, okay, I know coming in, I know this is going out. And to your point of not treating them like an employee and valuing their advice, like that is so big, because it leaves, when entrepreneurs treat our spouses like employees, it leaves them railroaded. Like they're a shell of a person because they're scared to get an answer wrong. They don't actually think like you. They don't actually want to be like you, but they've been trained to believe it because sometimes that's what.
And they want to support you.
Totally.
And they don't know how.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we are our own worst enemy when we get so optimistic. And by looking at that spreadsheet, that the profit plan that I'm going to share, the spouse can say, it's not working. Yeah. Like, it's okay if we pivot here. We have the numbers to prove it, instead of getting like way down into the tunnel. So I love this tool. So thank you for making that available.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you also, the opposite can happen. I had a guy who was doing my marketing for me. So as a result, it was in the funnel and he had access to the tool and he went and used it. And he was about to tell his family that he couldn't go away with them for Christmas. And he used the tool and rolled it out for the next 13 weeks. It was like the middle of November. So we rolled it out through, I think it was end of January, the middle of February. He goes, Pam, if I totally shut down any calls except for my existing clients, I'm still going to be making money over this period of time. I can actually take the whole month with my family. So the opposite can happen, because we sometimes get the opposite of optimistic.
Yep.
We get into this death spiral in our heads that, oh my God, it's failing, it's failing, it's failing. And when you really put it down on paper, because as entrepreneurs, we never pat ourselves on the back. We never go to bed saying, hey, here's the stuff I accomplished today that wasn't accomplished yesterday. Here's the stuff I know today I didn't know yesterday. All we do is go, I'm not there yet. And when you put this stuff on paper, sometimes you can actually see the opposite. It's like, I've got some really good traction going here. That happens as often as the other happens.
Yeah, I believe it. I totally believe it. It's very empowering, and it's easy. There's a YouTube video. So if if finance overwhelms you, this is very accessible.
Done in entrepreneur speak to make things I think I told you the first time you do it, it might take half an hour of your time, and then at the most 15 minutes a week. And it just, all of a sudden you can go, oh, there it is. I see it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was awesome.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
So what do we do on question number 1?
Fantastic. We are plugging right along.
Awesome.
The last question is the most important one, and that's the value of the stay-at-home spouse. But I wanted to make sure we leave time for that. The next one is, at what point do we get to start seeing the growth of the business reinvested into the household instead of back into the business?
Yeah, that is a very interesting and complicated question. And I'm going to try and give as basic an answer I can that can apply kind of across the board to people. So what happens, as we all know, as entrepreneurs, is you go from struggle to all of a sudden you have profit. And a decision has to be made on that profit. And I'm making the assumption now that it's a business where one spouse owns the business. The other spouse either works at home or works in another company somewhere, not they're working together or anything. So the way to think about this is, regardless of your wealth level, regardless of your wealth goals, there are formulas that go into all of this stuff. But there are a couple of pools where you can put we'll call it excess money. Okay. And those pools have some sort of risk level, low to high, right? And some sort of return level, low to high. And usually our businesses are high risk, but high return. Okay, so we've got our business up here, which is great. So if right now and here we're looking at both spouses, right? Both spouses and all the savings. Okay. And let's say you also have an emergency fund that you keep in a savings account that's incredibly liquid and it's making like 1.5 or 2%. Very low risk, very low return because it's probably insured by the government. So you've got some amount of money here. When you start to make more money than what you need just to run the business at the current level and an emergency fund for your family that you're comfortable with, then you start to address all of the other things. Well, hopefully, like in the States, you got 401k. I forget what it's called in Canada, but it's a similar tax protected savings account. You have some 401k. Your spouse may have a job and a 401k. You may have some stocks and bonds that you've played around in. You may be e-trading for fun. You may have some property. Etc. What you need to understand, or what I think people need to understand, is based on two things. Okay, one is their risk tolerance as a couple. Okay, so this is no longer entrepreneurial risk tolerance. This is your risk tolerance as a couple or as a family, and your age and what you want to do post-retirement. And by retirement, I don't mean you stop working. I mean that your active involvement in your business gets a little less and it becomes passive income for you or your investments. So one is what's your risk tolerance. Two is what's your age and what do you want to do post-retirement. And three is what are the other things you need to have money for along the way? You know, tuition, big vacation, weddings, you know, whatever we're planning for in the future. And when you know these three things, you can determine, now say this thing starts just spitting out money. All of a sudden there's a ton of money here. You probably don't want to keep it all invested in growing that business. Keep some of it here so the business can grow, sure. But you'll want to take some of it and scatter it at other levels of things. And each one of these is like a different level of risk and reward. Right? So maybe this is property and this is e-trading over here and stocks are over here, you know, whatever. You want to scatter it around this matrix so that you're what's called diversified. So if your business tanks tomorrow, you still have money in other things. If your business does fine, but the stock market crashes, you still have money in other things. If property values tank, but the stock market's fine, you still have other things. So the key is to spread it out in a way that is going to address how much money you want to earn on it, over what period of time you have to earn it, your risk tolerance as a couple. Like some people I just want it all in a 2% savings account. Mm-hmm. Now, there are tons of reasons to not do that, tons and tons, but some people psychologically, that's where we are. If we're going to have a business up here, I want every other dollar in a low risk savings account. And there's no right or wrong. Every couple has a unique answer to this question. So the other thing I'm going to say is I am not a financial planner by any stretch, but this is a very high level picture of what they put you through. And they learn all of this stuff down here through interviews with you and interviews with your spouse. But if you wanted to just kind of think about it yourself, know that you really want to get this in place as soon as you can. You definitely want to support and grow your business, but that these are very wide and extreme options. And there's a ton of place to play in the middle that will still get you nice return. And the overall concept is to balance that in a way that meets these objectives.
Yeah. And it's not a simultaneous give and take. It's a lot of times it's a time where the spouse will give early on as the business is growing and it needs the money to fuel the growth.
Yep.
And later on, as the business starts to cash flow and starts to get more prosperous, that's when the entrepreneur might have to give a little bit and say, back into the household.
Yep. You've been through a rocky ride for a year, honey. I'm going to put $100,000 in our savings account just so you can breathe.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's emotional value to putting money in low risk things and things as well as the financial value. So it's not always about interest rate.
Yes.
Or return. It's sometimes about emotional return.
Yes. 100%.
Cool.
So the biggest one.
All right.
Is when one, if the spouse of an entrepreneur is not working, the dynamics can get funky. It's either I don't want to spend any money because I feel guilty because I don't know how much money is coming in, or I'm not making any money, or, my spouse has so much purpose and passion and, they get so much recognition in their business. I don't. Maybe one of the ways that I numb is by shopping or spending or, not feeling appreciated because I'm not contributing financially or I'm on allowance or whatever that dynamic is. So how can we put an impossible value on an irreplaceable
resource?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually did this exercise for a friend of mine who was struggling with the fact that she was a stay-at-home mom. And like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I couldn't handle the psychology of it for her. But I said, I'm going to put some numbers on this for you. Okay. And she said, okay. I said, so let's just get clear what the jobs you are that you do at home. So you handle meal planning, shopping, cleaning, scheduling, driving. Oh, geez. Give me a couple more.
Counseling for your kids, you're the psychological.
Yeah, you're their counseling.
Anger manager for your spouse.
Yep, so a lot of counseling.
Wardrobe.
Yeah, that's right. Wardrobe, home design or home maintenance.
Social chair, doctor.
Yep. Nurse, certainly.
Yep.
Sometimes doctor. Okay. Let's see what else. That's a good sample set. So we got about 10 there, I think. And I said, okay, my friend's name, I'll just make her name up. I'll say, okay, Pat, sit down and tell me, let's look at a week, and tell me how much time you spend doing each of these things. And I made her fill it out. And it came out to like something ridiculous. Like if the normal business work week, quote unquote, is 40 hours, this came out to like, I don't know, 95 hours or something. So I said, first of all, hello, you're working 95 hours a week. Okay, let's just get that clear. So, and that's work. It's not stay at home relaxing. So if you actually take 10 minutes to have a cup of coffee, it's nothing to feel guilty about. You're working 95 hours. She happened to have 4 kids. So then I said, all right, let's go look up some salaries for each of these roles. And we looked up the salaries for each of these roles. And really what I said is, on top of all this, you are the CEO of the home. You are nothing less than a CEO. And guess what? No CEO has to do their own scheduling, big time CFO, chauffeuring, doesn't have to provide psychiatric help to their staff, doesn't have to help them with styling and wardrobe, doesn't have to fix the sink when it leaks, has people who actually do social chair and coordination for them, and they certainly aren't a nurse or a doctor. So first of all, you've got a skill set that is irreplaceable because you are doing all these things, and do not minimize that because it's in the home. This is just as complex as anything I'm doing at the entrepreneurial desk. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that the entrepreneur needs to recognize. This is a complex job, and it's a full-time ×2 job. And when we put the money on this, do you know what the salary was that we came out with?
What?
Just take a guess. Just take a ballpark guess at what an annual salary for this person based on the hours put in came out to. And I used very conservative rates for each of these roles.
The doctor, I'll say 350.
350,000? $1.5 million.
Awesome.
1.5 million. And then for fun, because that marker's not working real well. But because I found this so interesting, I thought, well, maybe that's because she has 4 kids. Okay. So then I made her, then she was done. I had helped, we had taken care of her psychology. She was fine at that point. But I said, now I want to do the numbers in case this were just one kid. And it came out at something like, 950,000 still, because a lot of this is, you get synergy with multiple kids.
Yes.
Just like in business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But basically we're saying it's $1 million to $1.5 million worth of value. You cannot feel guilty. So you don't generally draw a salary for any of this. So a good thing for an entrepreneur to recognize is that this is essentially investment in your business. No, it doesn't show up on the P&L, but everything this person is doing in your life and your family's life is stuff you don't have to pay to have done, because you're not going to have time to do it.
Not only pay to have done, but you don't have to think about. And so I can personally speak to this because I'm single mom, so I'm business owner, and all of it. And I remember at my breaking point, I was like, something's got to give. It's, it's not gonna be my kids. It's not gonna be my business. And I started to get this envy of my counterparts who were married, but it wasn't like my female counterparts who had husbands. I was like, I'm jealous.
I want a wife.
I want a wife. So I hired a wife.
Yes. You're not the first.
Right. And I said, I don't need an assistant. I need a wife who can think about, I'm out of Cheerios and we're out of light bulbs and all of the things that I cannot manage anymore.
House manager, basically. Home manager, home and family manager.
Yes. And the value of being able to complete a thought or work on my business was astonishing. So
absolutely.
The entrepreneur, like the mind share that your partner is carrying for you at home to run your life and your parents and the kids and the social, like it is.
This is half the list. This isn't even the whole. And the one thing I will say is that, what was I going to, you just made me think of something. Darn it. They're also carrying their worry about you.
Yes.
The entrepreneur on top of all that. That was going to say, a number of my clients have done exactly what you described. They've hired a house manager. Now you got to make sure the chemistry's there. You've got to connect. There's got to be trust, all of those things. But the value of those house managers now, if you want to get into a business right now, get into the business of finding and brokering relationships between entrepreneurs and housekeepers, or house managers, not housekeepers, because people would give their right hand for that wife. Yes. It's amazing what it takes out of your psyche. And yes, it costs money, but it doesn't cost this much. So if you've got a spouse doing this, you're even better off, because that's actually another way to look at it. If you have a spouse doing this and you're an entrepreneur, you may want to look at taking some of the pressure off them and maybe that's the first investment you make when you start to make a little bit of money in that balance. Mm-hmm. Is, honey, let's get a house manager.
Yes.
Whether it's a husband or wife that's having to manage it, it's a lot to manage.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up about getting into a business of, brokering house managers, because so the wife that I hired, her name is Kim. She's amazing. And she was empty nester. Her husband's a pilot. Both her kids left. She's like, this is just what I know how to do. Like,
what am I going to,
And so, that's what a lot of my clients are like, I've only ever been a stay-at-home mom and now my kids are gone, or now I need more purpose. What do I do? Like, it actually is a valued, sought after, respected, needed.
Absolutely.
So,
and there are a lot of us baby boomers now who our kids have grown up and left the home, and we've got the skill set and we like to use it. Yes. Because for a lot of people, myself as a CFO, I have the same thing. I love being the right hand to an entrepreneur. House managers love being the right hand to the homeowner. It's what they thrive on.
Absolutely. Awesome.
So
awesome.
This was so much fun.
It was so much fun. And we're totally under our time budget too.
We are. I'm so proud of us.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. I know this is a hot topic. If you guys need help with this in your business, please reach out to Pam. And if you'd like help with it in your house, please let me know. I will put the link for the download below. Perfect. It is amazing. So Pam, thank you so much for your time and thanks for watching.
Thank you. This was a ton of fun. Take care, you guys.
Bye-bye.